So I got the car, and one of my friends who was going lived up in Hartwood, and his bus wasn't going. I was going to meet him at Pool School. His bus wasn't going to get there in time, so I drove to Hartwood, picked him up, drove down to Pool School, and picked up the other three, and we drove to Stafford High School. And we got up to Stafford High School. He said Drew Middle School now, but Stafford High School, and parked right up front. I don't know what I was. I was getting nervous, but we were all jokesters in that car, but nobody said a word going up there. But to this day, nobody. I talked to them and said, I can't remember any conversation we had. Nobody said a word. Got out the car and started toward the front door. And a female saw us first. And she was the first one. So we were all five abreast. A female saw us first. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. She said, look, that's niggas, they coming to high school. And when they said that, my four friends, they backed behind me. So we started walking. I started walking and they were behind me. And they always called me the leader anyway. So, and then the secretary, who I had seen up there when I was talking to Mr. Durham, she came out the door and she said, come on in, Mr. Durham is expecting you. We went on into Stafford High School and then into the principal's conference room. Mr. Durham came in and he had not met any of the rest of them. He just had met me twice. We had talked. And so he told me, he said, and he called me Sherman. And he said, Sherman, he said, if I could, I'd put y'all in classes. He said, but I can't do that. He said, I don't have that kind of authority. So he told his secretary, he said, go call Mr. Gale and tell him what's going on. And she said, okay. She disappeared. And then he said, I tell you what I'm going to do. He said, I've got to go in to address the assembly. On the first day of school, everybody went into the auditorium. He said, I've got to go in here and address them. He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the loudspeaker on so that you can hear us. So I'll never forget that either. The secretary came back and said, Mr. Gale has already heard. He's on his way. Now, they didn't have cell phones. And somebody told him. Somebody called him like fast. So he went in and he had the loudspeaker on. And I'll never forget, they started off with the Lord's Prayer. I'll never forget that. And then he said, by now you heard that we got visitors in the building. Don't feel any ill will toward them. They just want an education just like you. And that was kind of self-assuring to us, you know. Well, in walks Mr. Gale. Now, again, Mr. Gale didn't know the other four. He only knew me because I had been up there driving the bus and all this stuff. So he knew me very well. And so he said, Gordon, you drive the bus this morning? I said, no, my brother John drove the bus this morning. He said, well, I didn't think y'all were going to power through with this, and he had applications in his hand. Well, he was supposed to have sent them to Richmond to the 3-man pupil placement board, wherein at that time there was a 3-man pupil placement board in Richmond that decided which kids of color could go to white schools. But he never sent those applications there. And he said, I got to send these to the pupil placement board. And he dropped the application. He was nervous too. He was scared. He dropped them on the floor. Well, I was scared, but by seeing him scared and nervous and he dropped them on the floor, I reached down and picked him up and gave him back to him. He dropped them twice. And so then he went on back out into the office, and he was talking loud so we could hear. And some other guy that I think it was a lawyer, somebody was there. And they were just talking real loud, and I could hear the guy say, T. Benton Gale said, you know, it was up to me, they'd never come up here. Then somebody else out there said, no, we don't want them up here because one rotten apple spoils the whole barrel. And we were in there listening to that. So Mr. Durham came back, and he said, well, it looks like you all are going to have to go back to Poole until we get these applications all straight. I said, okay. He said, now stay here because the press is up here now. They've gotten wind of it now, so the press is here. So stay here. So we stood there for about 5 minutes, and then Gary looked up at me and he said, Sherman, He said, we ain't scared of the press, so why we here? So I said, you're right. I said, come on, let's go. And so we got to the door, and Mr. Durham said, wait a minute, said the press still out here? I said, that's okay. We're not afraid of the press. Let's go. So we walked out, and that's when we walked out, and that picture's in the Freelance Star, where we just stepped outside the door. They got that picture of us. We went back down the pool, and that stopped classes. The classes stopped. Everybody want to know what happened. Everybody come out in the hallway, what happened? So we told them. And then, it wasn't that long, about 4 days later, the Freelance Star put in there that our application was denied because it got to Richmond too late. And I think it says 6 days too late or something like that. Well, then we began to recruit people in the lower classes and said, you all apply early. And so when we did that, they began to apply. And then the NAACP and the Civic Association and the school board got together. And there was a whole lot of stuff. Then the lawyers began to meet with some of them. And then the bottom line is that this was in September of, August actually of 1960. In 1962, I think it was 1962,
yeah.
Stafford County integrated grades 11 and 12 from the top down. It's the only place that I know of in the state of Virginia, and I've looked and looked and looked. There's no other place in the state of Virginia that integrated from the top down. Every place else integrated from the bottom up. Stafford integrated from the top down. 1962, they integrated grades 11 and 12. In 1963, it was 8, 9, and 10. And then in 1964, it was 1 through 7. And so that's the story.